Tony Online here, bringing you with a brand new video early in the morning, at 1 o'clock, because I am sleep deprived and I just got back from work. But I want to talk about this new interesting concept, this Danger Dark Worlds. It's kind of an interesting and looks like a very fun deck from what it looks like. I'm not saying that this is the correct list and how you should play it, but this is actually what I've perceived to be a very fun list. So without any further ado, I'm going to start off with the deck profile, then I'm going to go over the danger cards, because we haven't really gone over them on this channel, as well as the basic functionality of this deck, and what possible cards that you could be teching in with this archetype in general, specifically the danger archetypes, because there's actually quite a few things that I would like to go over. So anyway, let's jump right into that. 3. Bigfoot, basically you reveal it, and then your opponent randomly chooses a card. If they don't discard this card, you get to summon it, but if you do, if this card is discarded, I think you draw a card. Oh no, you destroy a card. You also get to draw a card if he's summoned, which is really cool. All of them have that effect where if they aren't discarded and they get summoned, they draw a card, and they do something else if they get discarded. Graphics are actually kind of good, kind of cool. It actually really works out in this deck. It's very fast, it's very potent, and it's a very strong card as always. Being able to just bounce any Dark World card from your hand that you control is really strong. He's not a hard once per turn, so it's really good. 3 Nessie. Nessie basically is he searches. If he's discarded, he searches, which is pretty good. His attack isn't very big, but his defense is pretty strong. So he's level 7. By the way, these are level 8s. 1 Lucient. I'll go over why this card is important later, or why this card is actually really good. 3 Snow. If you're playing Dark Worlds, you got to play 3 Snow. 3 Beige. Again, you could play 2. I've seen people play 2, but I think 3 is fine. You play this card because if it gets discarded at any point, you just get a free summon. It's kind of like the Danger's actual effect, except if they didn't get discarded, if they worked off discardations, but it doesn't. So 3 Chupacabra. This card summons another danger monster from the graveyard except itself, so that's pretty cool. 1 Phoenix Runner Warrior. This is basically just specifically for the tour guide in the deck. If he's sent to the graveyard, you send another fiend monster from your deck to the graveyard except this card. We'll explain why that's decent in a moment. So we're just keep going. 3 Brow. Aside from being another tour guide, this is obviously you play it in as a draw card for Dark Worlds in general. So you play 3 of this card. 1 tour guide. 3 Jackalope ? This card lets you summon one in defense position except itself, so that's pretty cool. And 1 Ibly, because Ibly is pretty decent. So overall, basically what we're doing here is we're combining 2 archetypes into one. These 2 special summon other danger cards. These do other things when they're sent. This guy summons or searches, and this guy destroys a card. This guy is not as important, in my opinion, as the other 3. And honestly, really, if you want to, you could probably cut this card too. But there's a reason why you probably shouldn't do that, because you could just easily fling this off later on. We have 3 Lower Darkness, because all these cards are dark, so you're probably not going to be discarding your entire hand at all. 3 Drag Down to Grave. I'm going to explain why you should play this card over Dark World Dealings. But basically, it's standard in a lot of Dark World lists. You played 3 Drag Down and you played 3 Dark World Dealings in both lists, but I think for the crunch, you play this over Dealings. Despite it being potentially searchable if Dark Worlds get a card that searches Dark World cards, but if that happens, then you definitely switch that out. So 3 Drayden, because you played 6 level 8 monsters, You don't play 7 swords because you only play the 3 Nessie, though you could actually tech that in if you don't have trade-ins, but it's better if you have trade-in though. 1 Soul Charge because this card's absolutely busted. 1 Foolish Bro because this card is low-key actually kind of busted, because having the ability to send anything to the graveyard to thin your deck is pretty good, even if it's not, even if it doesn't do something immediately. Monster Reborn, it obviously is pretty good. We'll get into the extra deck and the ratios in which you could play it. We're also going to talk about potential cards in the future that you should probably take in as well. But for now, we're just going to focus primarily on what we're working with right now. So we're going to discuss Drag Down to the Grave versus Darkwood Inns. Sure, your opponent gets to know what cards are in your hand, but that generally in this case doesn't really matter. Let's say you're playing against like Sky Strikers, it really doesn't matter if they know what cards are in your hand. It really matters if you know their information. So if you already know what they're going for, you can just immediately stop it from happening. For example, your opponent has an engage in hand, and they have no other ways of searching out another engage or getting to that engage. Like they don't have a Hornet Bit for some reason, or they don't have a Hornet Bit, or they have Hornet Bit but they don't have the engage. You can simply just snipe that out of their hand. Also, if you're playing against decks that main deck or side deck in permanence, you can kill that card as well. It was very useful in the matchup against for that Goki player who did do that. He used it to snatch out that impermanence out of his opponent's hand, so he could just continue his plays as normal. Also, it's also very good for sniping out potential hand traps. Your opponent can, I believe, ash this because it is drawing cards, but I think you have to reveal first and then choose. So your opponent might not get the chance to discard for the effect. I'm not entirely sure on the ruling on this. It's very weird, but my suspicion leads me to believe that they might not be able to. But it's very good for that as well. It's also very good for getting rid of key combo pieces out of your opponent's hand, and it really doesn't matter in this deck what cards your opponent discards from your hand, because they all either really synergize with themselves or you probably couldn't play them in the first place. So it's good in that regard. Next, we're going to discuss Lucient, Netherlord of Dark World. People might not actually know what this card does, or even know that it existed for Dark Worlds. This card came out of Primal Origins about several years ago, and it never really did anything for Dark Worlds until now. I do think that you play this as a one of at most, though, because we're going to read this effect right now. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by an effect, special summon this card from the graveyard. Then, if it was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon 1 Fiend-type monster from your deck to either side of the field. Now, the reason why this is really good is because it gives you essentially a free Grappa or a free Bigfoot to the field. It's kind of like just trading off this powerhouse. Actually, you're not really trading this because you're special summoning it either way to gain a lot of potential advantage. Granted, your opponent has to discard this, which is why I think it's a one of, but you can definitely side in multiples if you're playing against, for example, a mirror match. Because if this deck takes off, you're going to see a lot of Dark World danger decks. And this will be a very good card to have in your side deck because your opponent discards it out of your hand when you activate your effect, or vice versa. They activate a card to discard a card from your hand. They potentially lose the game out of this card. It's essentially really good as a blowout card, but I think you main deck one if you don't face a mirror match because it procs itself. If you discard it, it's kind of like a beige in a way. In that way, it works a lot better for this deck. Onto some of the extra deck choices. There's a lot of ways you could take this, but I chose this way because it seems like it to be the most palatable. So we're playing 1 Mermaid, 2 Goblin, 1 Torrent Cerberus, 1 Phoenix, 1 Unicorn, 1 Firewall Dragon, 1 Sairija, 1 Leviair, the Sea Dragon, 1 Lancelot, 1 Felgrand, 1 Hope Harbinger, 1 Zombie Sign, 1 Pain Gainer, and 1 Seven Sins. I think if you're playing any deck that can make rank 8s, you should definitely play Pain Gainer. Unless you're like Blue Eyes, then don't worry about it. But if in this deck, it's really cool because if you make 7 Deadly Sins, you potentially blow out your opponent because they can't get over this card unless they kaiju it. And if they leave it on the field, they're going to remove everything off the field that they control. It's very good, and I think it's worth playing, at least in some parts. So Hope Harbinger is kind of like one of those cards that you just lock out. It just helps you lock out your opponent. You actually link your opponent, and then you summon this card. You can alternatively play Trigate Wizard, which also does kind of the same thing. So if you want to, that's a possibility. Also, Levier is extremely good because you are probably going to banish quite a few cards. This will help you recoup some of your losses. It has to be a level 4 or lower monster, so I guess that's a bummer. But I guess it really doesn't make a difference in the long run, as long as you don't destroy your valuable piece. Cyresia is really good because you run through your hand pretty quickly. Very similar to Lightsworns, this deck is, where if you're not careful, you can potentially just lose the game. So, because you deck yourself out. But this card allows you to recoup some of the losses that you possibly could have lost throughout the game. So, Firewall Dragon, because Firewall Dragon is absolutely broken. Please ban this card, Konami. I don't want any more Firewall shenanigans. Don't want that. And the Nightmare stuff, because it's easy to extra link and it's easy to maneuver. And these are kind of like the starting points for any Xyz or Link deck. I think if you do this, it's very good. Though you shouldn't probably rely on extra linking, but it is an option for you. Alternatively, you can also play Tomahawk because he makes tokens. You could play Trigate Wizard because Trigate Wizard is free negates and also banishes cards. You could also play Borreload, Topologic Bomber Dragon. You can also play Trisbania as a Link 3 if you also want to do that. So you can completely wipe out your opponent's board if you, at the push of a button, literally. Because if you summon Grapha into a zone, you just blow up your opponent's board and you win the game. So I think there are multiple ways of building your extra deck around this mechanic. Also, you could play another, like I said, Lucian is pretty good. Dark World Dealings is, if you don't want to play Drag Down because of the information thing, I totally understand. Then this card's your best alternative. It does practically the same thing. Some people are playing Shaddoll's in their list. They are either playing a Danger Shaddoll list, which I could go over later, or they're playing something else. They're playing this with Dark Worlds, which I think if you're playing this with Dark Worlds, it's not very correct, because you have to, because drawing cards is fine, and being sent to the graveyard is fine. You have all these neat synergies and stuff like that, but for the most part, the Dark World cards and the Danger cards just present themselves with enough power to beat your opponent out and win you the game. Other cards that you could potentially play is like the Vanities cards, specifically Vanities Fiend. It's very popular in Burning Abyss, because you just summon a Burning Abyss monster, you tribute it, and then you summon Vanities Fiend. So you can kind of do it here as well. Your opponent, you reveal this card, you reveal one of your danger cards, special summon that danger card if they didn't pick it, and then you tribute it for Vanities Emptiness, and you kind of just lock them out of the game. So it's pretty good that way. You could play a Lilith and the Trap. The Trap is extremely good. Graceful Charity is still broken, even though this is in the Trap form. But the reason why I'm not playing this is because it's a trap, and traps are incredibly slow. However, you can combine this with Lilith to get impermanence, as well as evenly match this card, Danger Trap, as well as like Dimensional Barrier, stuff like that. Other really good normal traps that are powerful, like Bottomless Trap Hole and stuff like that. Though this build, if you go this route, I think you would probably take out the tour guideline, and you would probably take out the Lucian, because I don't think you can actively play those cards and then still be able to be successful. I think you could probably maybe play the tour guide just to summon the Lilith, but you can activate his effect, so there wouldn't be really much of a point to doing so. Another interesting card that I actually didn't think of because it didn't really dawn on me is Forced Requisition. This is a very old card, and I think it's actually been eroded quite a number of times. But if you don't know what this card is you can activate this card when you discard a card from your hand. After that, each time you discard from your hand, your opponent must also discard cards of the same number of cards in their hand. So basically, like if you discard 2 cards, your opponent has to discard 2 cards as well. It forces your opponent to either destroy this card or they're going to lose the game, or something else. The problem with this card is the fact that we're living in a Sky Striker heavy format, and if you give your opponent too many spells, that could be very bad for them. However, if you're facing against a deck that's not traditionally Sky Striker, like if you're playing against a Goki deck or if you're playing against Altergeist, etc., this card could actually be very good. And if you're also playing against the mirror match, you side these out pretty much immediately if you're main decking them, or you just don't play them at all in the main deck and you just leave them in your side deck. This card is kind of decent. I think at some point this will probably make in some lists in the future. It depends on the person, but this card is very, very strong. Overall, I do think like Danger at some point will become a viable deck. At this current point in time, there's not enough here to become a pure Danger deck. But I think Dark Worlds is in the step in the right direction. I think this deck was made for Danger. Or actually, no, Danger was made for this deck because they kind of do the same thing that Burning Abyss does, and they also act like Dark World cards, which they're incredibly strong cards that do incredibly good things, and they also react to your opponent's discards, and they discard too. It's really good. I think overall the deck is going to be very fun to play. I've seen people play this deck, and it looks absolutely incredible, and it made me want to play this deck. So anyway, if you guys did enjoy, please leave a comment in the comment section below. I will see you guys in the next video. This has been Truth in the Lines, signing out.